What's going on, y'all? It's your boy Cool Colas here, and you are now tuning into a new video on my channel. But before we get on to the topic for today, I would love for you to do a few things. Hit the like button, hit the subscribe button, hit the share button so you can share this video with all your friends, family, and anybody else who you believe would love this topic. Hit the bell icon so that you get notifications for whenever I come out with new content on this channel. And at the very end, I would love it if you left me a comment below. That way I can get back to it when I am done with the topic. For today's topic, I want to talk about why a black man should never be a simp. Now, when it comes to this topic, before we dive deep into it, we need to talk about all the nuances. So that means that we need to talk about how a simp would even be defined, and we need to talk about how they even get to this point. When it comes to the term simp, a lot of people purposefully mess up the definition, but we really need to talk about what it means. And the best way that I can do that is to show you the difference between what I think a lot of people try to insinuate a simp is versus what it actually is. There is a difference between a simp and a kind man. A kind man is somebody who does something kind for a woman because that is in his nature. He is somebody who does something kind because he loves the woman that he's dealing with, or he has a positive relationship and he wants to do something thoughtful. That is a kind man. They're just doing it just because. A simp is somebody who protects, defends, or does something for a woman despite the fact that she has terrible behavior. So in other words, they do something for a woman who they really should be holding accountable. So simps typically cater to women who really have issues that need to be targeted and they need to really be called out on their bullshit. But instead of doing that, they rather either defend that woman or get mad at the person who is giving accountability to that woman who deserves it, or they're just using, again, red herrings to miss the point of why this woman deserves accountability and why her actions are the way that they are. They use going out of their way and being kind as a way to appease this woman, despite the fact that she is unruly and she is somebody who has a behavior that makes her difficult to deal with, or people just don't really want to be around her, especially when it comes to relationships. So when we're talking about simps, we're talking about that second thing that I discussed. Men who do things for women, such as defending them, giving them things, doing nice things for them, or attacking somebody else who tries to address or criticize them, instead of giving them accountability for their actions or addressing how their actions are negative or affect other people. This is important because I'm saying this from personal experience. I'm somebody who in the past, admittedly, was somebody who had simp-like behaviors. I did a lot of simpish things growing up. And looking back, I realized the mistakes and the errors of the things that I've done. But more importantly, I understand where it came from and where all of this started. So I'm giving you this from the perspective of somebody who actually has done this and the psychology of why it's problematic and why this is something that I would never, ever encourage another dude to do, and you really need to get out of. Now, I'm not saying everything I did was simpish. I'm saying that there are a lot of things that I did do, and I'm looking at it and I'm like, man, that was some cringe ass shit. I'm not going to do that again. And obviously I'm married and whatnot, but at the same time, it's one of those things where this is a lesson for dudes in the future, because the reality is that black men are positioned to lead relationships, and they're also positioned to set the tone and to set the standard as to how relationships are supposed to function in the black community. And this is especially important given that we have a media that's run by the dominant society that tries to distort the images of our relationships and tries to change the dynamics and tries to change the way that we see each other. So I've said this many times before, but if you look at a lot of the movies and TV shows and things like that that are out, they are meant to indoctrinate society and then to reflect the results simultaneously. So they're teaching us how we should behave, and then also showing other movies and TV shows that show the result of this indoctrination. And it confuses people because they're being shown at the same time. So for those who view different movies and television shows, it goes back to that concept of what came first, the chicken or the egg. Also, with these so-called black love movies, they love to do one or two things. They either love to show a black woman why a black man should be a simp, or they love to teach a black man on how to be a simp. If you look at a lot of the different tropes that they have in these movies, it's either a black woman who is presenting herself as a victim or as somebody who has been treated poorly by a black man. That same black man is usually villainized and is treated as the worst thing ever that existed. But if you look at a lot of the backstory, they leave details out, but the few details that they keep show why she was part of the problem or why she was fully the problem, and they just distorted it. The other thing that they love to do too is they love to take her behaviors, which either are promiscuous, hypergamous, toxic, or she's just straight up the problem of the movie, and they love to treat that as if that's somewhat of a life lesson, or as if like she basically spit some real shit or she did something that is totally acceptable. So they love to basically normalize the things that she does that are toxic. And then when it comes to the black men, they love to have, again, a black man who is totally a villain, and then one who is a simp, who almost is like a Captain Save-A-Ho. He's basically going after or attacking this black man because of the way that he has treated this black woman. So even in these movies, they teach a lot of black women to be unaccountable for their actions, and they especially do it for older black women like the shea butter mamas I talked about, who like typically are showing themselves to be disrespectful and loving, unfeminine, and a lot of times are single mothers, and they use their poor behaviors and poor decision making to try to justify it by turning it into a life lesson. So you see that quite a bit in these movies. And if you ever notice, a lot of black women are the ones who uplift these movies as if they're the best things ever. That's why they say, oh, I love this movie. This was my movie. This was the movie I loved to see back in the day. You know, they always say things about how, you know, these black love movies were the greatest thing ever. But that's because they enabled their poor behaviors in decision making. But you never hear a black man talking about how these were the greatest movies ever. And a lot of times it's because we can look back and identify how we were portrayed in a negative light. Now, when it comes to who is responsible for creating this epidemic of simps, there are two types of people, or two groups of people, that are responsible for this behavior. The first group is what I would call the single mother / household full of women group. The reason why they are problematic is because oftentimes when they raise a black man, they do not have the presence of another man to help them. Therefore, they cannot do it properly. And what they end up doing is they end up projecting a lot of their frustrations with other black men onto that young black man who they're raising, either by being disrespectful, mean-spirited, terrible, toxic, and all this other stuff to that man, or trying to control them. And most of the time when they control that man, they control them by basically trying to turn him into the man that they believed that they wanted in the first place. And they also use that from the perspective of their failed relationships with the black men that they have dealt with in the past. So ultimately, there's a level of hatred and maybe even revenge that comes from having that black man to raise, because they do not want him to be a reflection of the man that they had a bad relationship with. And there are many times even where they raise that man to be a simp based off the fact that they want a man who is going to excuse them from not being accountable for the ways that they treat others and their actions and the things that they choose to do to other people. And the problem is that we have an epidemic in a society where a lot of black women are not allowed to be called out on their bullshit, or it's seen as unpopular, or it's seen as narcissistic, or that type of thing. And that's the reality of the way that they end up raising a black man who ends up becoming a simp, because when he gets older, he'll say things like, well, you know, I always cater to women because I was raised by a strong black woman. And a lot of times what strong, quote unquote, really means is rude, abrasive, unpleasant, hard to deal with, hard to have a conversation with. and they're using it to compensate for the fact that they really are angry and vengeful because of their relationships. So they feel that they need to compensate. And a lot of times it ends up being a thing where they're even unloving sometimes as well too. And even if they want to sit there and they want to call it tough love, what it ends up turning into is a situation where they can dish shit, but they cannot take it. Because a lot of times these same women, if you try to tell them about when they're wrong or when they need to be held accountable or when they do something that is detrimental or they do something that hurts you or disrespects you, then they're very defensive and they really don't want to hear it. So again, they dish it, but they can't take it. Regardless, the point that I'm trying to make is that they are one of the people who are responsible for creating a lot of these black men who end up becoming simps because they want to control that black man based off of their inability to be able to control the way their relationships went. The second type of person who has to deal with or who is responsible for creating a simp is a black man who is a father or somebody who was a parental figure who was a simp himself. Somebody who said, just, you know how it was with old niggas back in the day. Some of them were like, just a happy wife, happy life. Just let her do what she want to do. I ain't even gonna deal with it. They had that type of mentality and attitude, and they basically raise you to be the same way. And they'll put the label on, they'll put the label of, if you're a man, then you just gonna do what she says on it, as if now this is the trait of what it means to be a man. Now, the reason why this is problematic is because, again, the black man is supposed to set the standard and they are supposed to set the tone. And part of being able to uphold your masculinity is to be able to stand on your square regardless of what anybody basically says. And I think that's a very difficult challenge for a young man, especially who is a simp, because he is being raised by individuals who are telling him this is the right way, that's the right way. And then when he finds out it's wrong, society is basically kicking him in the ass. That shit is not cool. Point I'm trying to make though is that when it comes to being a simp, it's very detrimental, because if you are somebody who is a simp, you're enabling somebody to have a behavior that is unruly, that is unacceptable, that is disrespectful, and that is not a good reflection on how black relationships go or how they should go. So it is our job to basically check these things up front, regardless of how that individual reacts. Because a lot of times when it comes to these women who you're dealing with, the best thing that you can do when they are unruly, disrespectful, mean-spirited, that type of thing, they do something you don't like, cross a boundary, is to check them up front. But what a simp does instead is they basically capitulate and they basically bow down and say, you know what, I'm sorry, I shouldn't have did this, I shouldn't have did that, or they just let that chick run all over them. And even if they try to correct the behavior later, then they're not able to, because now she either doesn't respect them or she really doesn't want to listen because he's let it go on for so long. Now, that's why it's important for us as black men to be able to speak up whenever we see a chick who is acting in a way that we don't appreciate or that we do not like. It is very, very important that we do that and that we instill that in our kids, because there are a lot of women who have been taught with these feminist behaviors who are, again, unruly, disrespectful, mean, and will talk over you and will make little pot shots and things like that a lot of us really don't appreciate, and then we'll just let it ride. You cannot do that. You need to tell them that it's not cool, and that if they are going to continue to do that, you're going to drop them like a bad habit and then drop their asses like a bad motherfucking habit. Seriously, it's really just as simple as that. But when it comes to being a simp, you have to understand that although she is unruly, although she is disrespectful, although she is rude, you play a part because you're allowing this behavior to go on when you have all of the power in the world to set the standard and basically say, hey, this shit is not cool and I'm not going to let that fly as long as you are around me. Because here's the thing, if enough of us are doing that every time she deals with somebody, she's not going to want to continue to act in the way that she's acting, because of the fact that she feels that she'll never be able to get anybody with her behavior. And really, if you set that standard up front, a real woman who actually likes you is going to listen and is going to be able to take that and understand why this was difficult, why what she was doing was disrespectful. So you need to let her know up front when she crosses a boundary. But when it comes to these simps, they are the most difficult people to deal with, because what a simp shows you is that they will capitulate to something even if they know that it isn't right. That's the problem. They submit to things even when they know it's not right. So the psychology here is that it's not even just an idea of this man being weak, but he also just does not have integrity. Because then you have to ask yourself, if this man is willing to submit to this woman despite the fact that her behavior is totally out of order, what else would he submit to although it's out of order? And that makes you kind of think at that point in terms of like white supremacy and race. What else would this man really do? Because the reality is that a simp isn't just a problem because he lets the bad behavior of a woman go. A simp is a problem because he most likely will let the bad behavior of anybody go. But really, the reality is that he believes that it's not his problem to be able to deal with, when again, the whole point here is that the man sets the standard. So my advice here, do not be a simp. And I also want to say that although I typically don't try to use this term so much, it's important for us to talk about, because there are too many of us walking around allowing women to be unruly and allowing them to be in our space and in our mix while acting in a certain way without telling them, hey, this is not cool, or basically kicking their asses to the curb and allowing them to basically be single for the rest of their life. So I just wanted to make sure that we talked about that, because this is going to be very important when it comes to black men especially, and being able to uphold your masculinity. Anyway, y'all, I hope you enjoyed this video. I hope you enjoyed what I had to say. I'll be having more videos to come soon, so be sure to stay tuned. Other than that, I hope y'all have a good rest of y'all's day, and I'll talk to you later. Peace.